So please prepare to welcome Professor Olivier Oullier to the stage.
Last week, in Europe and the rest of the world, we found out that access to Fable 5 and Mythos has been cut following an order from the White House. It was at the same time a reality check and a wake-up call. When it comes to AI systems and the AI industry, most of the people who are part of the entire AI world are tenants, not owners. Following this announcement, there were lots of reaction all over the world. How can we improve sovereignty and not depend on a few stakeholders? Yesterday at Biotech, the French Prime Minister announced an investment of 655 million euros for sovereignty. It looks substantial, but it covers research, compute, industry. And when you think that 1 gigawatt that is being used for powering AI costs on average $50 billion, suddenly the 655 million figure no longer looks so substantial. The problem when it comes to sovereignty is that no single stakeholder, no single country, no single company can do it all. And they have to face bottlenecks. The oldest bottleneck when it comes to AI systems is a bottleneck that is related to knowledge circulation. Distilling models, is it possible? Are we facing models that are locked, solutions that are locked? And we have to deal with how the know-how would move. The second bottleneck is infrastructure. There is a massive gap between the US, China, and the rest of the world. Yet, one could argue that this bottleneck could be closed with capital. The third one, this third bottleneck that is important, is adoption. You can have the best technology ever. If no one is using it or no one has access, it's basically useless. And the fourth one is intelligence itself. Think about it. Today, there are still humans in the loop, but we're contemplating recursive AI systems that are training themselves. And when it comes to intelligence and access to intelligence, some people are currently riding a horse while others are driving a Formula One. Map those bottlenecks to time. And knowledge circulation is the past. Infrastructure is today, and recursive AI is tomorrow. The European Commission is well aware of the issue of sovereignty. And if you look at the most recent packages, it has integrated semiconductors. It has integrated compute, cloud, open source in one common agenda. But is that sufficient? What is important is to build ecosystems, multi-layer systems, because the system will outlast the technology. We need those systems to be efficient, to be resilient, and to be future-proof for the next wave, the next technological and scientific disruption, be it quantum or otherwise. Systems will outlast the technology. So, today we're here to talk about how partnerships can be built, how sovereignty is not just a matter of trying the impossible, meaning building, developing, owning everything in your own company, in your own country, in your own continent or supranational organization. And to speak to the systemic layer, the partnership, let me welcome Talal Kaissi, CEO of Core 42 and Group Chief Global Affairs Officer at G42. Talal. It is my pleasure also to welcome Nat Ives, Director of Enterprise at NVIDIA, to speak to us about the infrastructure, compute, and chips layer. And our last panelist is Philippe Limantour, who is CTO and CSO of Microsoft France, for the last layer that we're going to address today, the enterprise layer that reaches people, the end users, and the companies. Philippe, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here, Talal. Let's start with the fact that when we're talking about sovereignty in Europe, we see a lot of strategies that look like let's depend less and less on non-European vendors. And I have moved about a year ago to the UAE, and what really struck me is the fact that the UAE has been able to build a sovereign system when it comes to AI, in terms of infrastructures and all these layers, but not with 100% UAE-based created solutions, but thanks to key partnerships, international partnerships with multi-stakeholders. Now, can you share with us what the journey was and what the strategy should be, in your opinion, when it comes to Europe's sovereignty or any supranational body for that matter?
Great, thank you, Olivier. And that was a great introduction, by the way. I think you touched on all the high points. But maybe what I can say is that I think Europe is definitely asking the right question, but often in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
The issue isn't really whether Europe can build AI alone. It's more or less whether Europe can retain strategic control while still participating in global AI ecosystems. So in our experience, sovereignty is really not isolation. You need partnerships, you need control and operation, you need control over jurisdiction, access, governance, compliance, and the ability to have it become auditable. And that's really what separates dependency from real strategic confidence. So what we've learned in our experience that you described in the UAE, Olivier, is that partnerships don't weaken the sovereignty operating model if the model is designed correctly from the start. And a good example is the sovereign public cloud. I mean, we work with Microsoft and leverage technologies like in processing or in memory encryption, along with encryption in transit and encryption at rest, to have full data lifecycle encryption and enable public cloud consumption for the public sector and regulated industries for the majority of workloads that the government has. But on that same side of the coin, you do have secret and top secret data that require a level of autarky and isolation that only an air gap or a disconnected cloud can have. So there needs to be a ratio, there needs to be a hybrid implementation, and there needs to be leverage of partnerships like NVIDIA and Microsoft, where you can have the best-in-class technologies and environments that are suitable for the types of workloads that you deploy in.
I think a good example of that is the 5 gigawatt AI campus in the UAE, right?
Very much so. And something you mentioned earlier, I think, was extremely important maybe to double click on. When you look at the cost of what it takes to build an AI data center, and we're talking about data centers that are pulling, I mean, NVIDIA right now with the GB300 is pulling, what, 140 or more kilowatts per rack. This is opposed to what traditionally happened with 25 kilowatt racks for traditional cloud infrastructure. So when you think of the energy that's required, the shell and core, the power generation, the liquid cooling, the networking infrastructure, that CapEx that you mentioned of $50 billion a gigawatt is something that you can only multiply by hundreds of gigawatts that are required for the demand profile that we are working towards. And with Jevons paradox, that macroeconomic theory that the more supply you put, the more demand you're creating, so it's an insatiable demand for AI compute, there's going to need to be hundreds of gigawatts that are built globally. So that's massive in terms of investment and very prohibitive for certain countries. So when a country like the UAE dedicates 5 gigawatts of energy, clean energy, to manufacture intelligence, we're really starting to go from a country that exported hydrocarbons and barrels of oil to exporting intelligence in tokens. Because the ability to serve a 3,200 kilometer radius, about half the world's population, sub 60 milliseconds, then presents an opportunity for countries that might not be able to have the economic wherewithal or the political wherewithal to be able to build these data centers in those countries. So that 5 gigawatt cluster, apart from the domestic consumption, is going to be very much something for exportable tokens and intelligence from the UAE.
Nat, one thing that people found out last year is a big announcement of a partnership between Mistral and NVIDIA for a sovereign solution. And uninformed people of the importance of partnerships and the fact that not everything needs to be located, owned locally, were a bit surprised, saying, wait, Mistral, French, European, NVIDIA, American, how is that sovereign? Can you explain to us the process, and building on this, how the partnership between NVIDIA and Core42 has helped many organizations and contributed to the sovereignty of AI in Europe?
Yeah, so great to be back at Biotech. Yeah, that announcement last year was kind of a milestone for France and the ecosystem. I think when we talk about AI, as your introduction, Olivier, alluded to, it's not just a simple software thing. Actually, the complexity behind making modern AI and frontier AI possible is huge and requires a big, heavy lift by players all across the ecosystem. Jensen likes to talk about the 5-layer cake. It starts with availability of electricity. Then we move into the chips, which is obviously where NVIDIA is well known. The infrastructure, so the data centers, the servers, the electrical distribution, the cooling, then into the models, and finally into the software applications that business and government are going to use to deliver value. And this layered cake involves many players in many industries all around the world working together in what can be described as kind of an ecosystem marvel, that we're actually delivering this complexity at the speed that we are. So I think if you look at previous industrial revolutions, they all drove in considerable amount of infrastructure build out. So yes, the AI revolution is a software revolution, but behind it, we're building out this infrastructure at incredible pace, at a scale and speed and level of investment that no one has ever seen before. And that's exciting. But no one can achieve that on their own within one company, within one geography. And if you look at even at very successful French companies that are historic, if we look at Airbus or Michelin or L'Oreal or even French nuclear power, these supply chains and behind these very big and successful industries are incredibly global and incredibly complex. And Europe, France, and the neighbors have been navigating these global supply chains for centuries. So we're very good at doing it. So when we think about building sovereign AI, it's not about does the supply chain have to be in one geography or one postcode? It's about, do I have control? Do I have choice? And in AI, there's not one flavor of AI. One size will not fit all, depending on where you want to deploy it, what you want to use it for, what the data is. It's a very complex situation to mix the right building bricks together to make the right solution. So you need to have control over that. Part of that is definitely open source. NVIDIA is a big contributor to open source AI, but as is Mistral. So in Mistral, not only did we see a European champion that we wanted to support and enable, we saw a kindred spirit in terms of open source and choice, and hence we made that partnership and that announcement.
Well, it's very interesting to hear a key player in infrastructure, NVIDIA, remind us how important it is to learn from legacy industry in the AI era, that supply chain is rarely 100% national or local, and we need to learn from this model as well. Speaking of which, Philippe, so Microsoft has answered some of the concerns of the European Commission by developing solutions that are European-based. So the servers are in Europe, data is stored in Europe, compute is in Europe, yet you remain an American company that has to answer to American laws. Can you share with us how Microsoft is ensuring contributing to sovereign European AI this way, despite one foot in Europe and one foot in the US when it comes to regulation?
Sure, nice to be here. First, let's go back to the root of what we are talking about. It's about demand. So first, we have to acknowledge that there is a huge demand for AI, for new systems, for cybersecurity. Companies of all sizes, all industries, everywhere in the world want to transform themselves to win on the markets, to win other markets also. So it's not only about being local, but being an international company, except public sectors companies specific. So this is a complex world. If you want to follow the pace of NVIDIA's roadmap and life cycle of products, if you want to follow the pace of updating, patching against cybersecurity threats, you have to have an infrastructure which is highly not only scalable, but an adaptive one. And a hyperscaler world provides that possibility. Then you had the choice because people don't want to be dependent on a single component in the supply chain life cycle. So we are a platform. Microsoft is, from the past 50 years, have been building a platform with an ecosystem of partners. That's what we did in the UAE with Core 42. That's what we are doing every day with NVIDIA everywhere in the world, with Mistral in France and Europe. So we work with partners, but the first thing is, yes, Microsoft France is a French company with a US headquarter. First, to remind that almost all the companies are subject to data requests. There's a new e-evidence in Europe, which is the equivalent of the cloud-out, which holds also data access in Europe. So if you do some business in another country, and you bet you should, because if you want to be a big player on the market, you can't just play locally. So that's the first thing. The other side of the complexity is regulatory environment.
Sure. Absolutely.
Every 3 to 5 days, there is either a new regulation or an update on a regulation somewhere in the world. So how do you keep pace of keeping your business compliant? Because if you're not, you don't have the license to operate in a country. And each country has its own set of legal constraints. Even in Europe, each country, there is a European level and then the French level. So we need partners to adapt, to ensure that the customers are delivered with platform of choice. We have 11,000 models available in Microsoft Foundry, for example. But at the same time, we scan them automatically. We ensure that they are secure. We ensure that no one has broken the weight inside it. That's the same for the whole securization of the assets. That's the same of ensuring that everything is up to date, that there is no supply chain attack.
Excellent.
So that's really where the partnership is built. So we have our own data centers. We upgraded the infrastructure in Europe by 85% in the last 2 years. We have a continuum of platform. So we are working locally, like in UAE, the same in Bleu in France or Delos Cloud in Germany.
Well, let me build on this.
Partners.
Let me build on this, Philippe, because that really is a great segue to you, Talal, and the fact that Core 42 has a partnership with Microsoft, amongst other companies, big partnership, but also you have headquarters in Europe, you have deployed in France, in Italy, and beyond, and you too have to face those constraints, meaning that you're a UAE company that has deployed infrastructure in Europe. How is Core 42 dealing with this complexity?
By maximizing optionality. I think a key component of what we've done in the UAE successfully in enabling digitally sovereign nation by leveraging partnerships and figuring out the balancing of what needs to go in an air gap versus what needs to leverage a public cloud with the right policy set, control set, technical solutions, is one component, but there's also operational sovereignty. There are multiple layers of sovereignty. It's not just data sovereignty that's important. Different types of workloads require different levels of isolation, different levels of operational sovereignty. So in the case of Europe, we know the security imperatives that the European Commission has are such that there needs to be a level of localization involved as well. So it's not only about us bringing GPUs and putting up an environment in the continent and then saying, we'll do everything for you. No, we look at local partners that can help with the different elements of sovereignty for every particular use case. So these are the types of things that I think in maximizing optionality, we're able to bring to the table to emulate the success story we've had in the UAE in enabling these types of environments.
And to expand it to other territories and beyond UAE, we saw recently some big signing between President Macron and Khaldoun.
Yes.
Things are progressing, and the fact that there are these collaborations and we're looking at what is happening at government, I would like to go back to you, Nat. Your perimeter covers France, Benelux, Nordics. You have a wealth of experience and data points when it comes to adoptions and some of the hurdles. Which layers are being covered at the moment, and which layers are not being invested in or considered in the governments that you've been working with?
So I think, in general, all layers are being considered and invested in and are being covered, but obviously different geographies, different industries as well find themselves in different situations. France has the fortune and great choices historically to have basically all the layers covered, actually. If we look at France with power, with the ability to build out infrastructure, great capability locally around data center infrastructure, frontier labs like Mistral, H Company, and others based in Paris, AMI. And actually, I'm pleased to say, like the French public, there was a survey that came out about a week ago. 60% of French people are now using AI regularly. And I think that's like the 5th country in the world in terms of AI adoption. And over half of French people are using AI at least weekly. So if I look at the other geographies, the Nordics, they have most of those bases covered. I don't really like comparing between geographies because a lot of the constraints, like for Benelux, in terms of space and electricity, are historic. But they're all working together, and we bring the ecosystem together. As I already said, these data centers, these projects are extremely complex, and it's only through extreme co-design that we can actually achieve the level of density and capability that's required for modern AI. And that's why working with partners like Core42 and Microsoft is super important.
Wow. Philippe, one of the things I like a lot about your title is your CSO and CTO. As an academic researcher and tech entrepreneur, I appreciate the fact that science and technology are together because you cannot consider one without the other. That was my public service announcement of the day. With your experience, when it comes to governments in Europe, the layers are one thing, but then adoption, speed, innovation. Where do you think that there is the biggest gap to fill? Or if you had to push and hold the hand of some of the decision makers in this supranational body that is the European Union, where do you think the priorities should go at the moment?
Everything should go in thinking about how to innovate as fast as possible. That's the target. Because we are talking about risk management, and innovating is taking risks. And then you have the counterpart to control those risks. I think as Nat said, the French people are the most advanced in the world in adopting AI. I think if I would have to focus on one thing, would be training on AI or learning on AI at the executive committees and board level. I think
AI literacy. Yeah,
I think that's where, because it has to go at some point within the strategy of the company. Because being a frontier firm really means using AI not to incrementally move, but to reinvent the processes, reinvent the way you work, reinvent the way the organizational model is set. That has to come from the top of the company. Then the next layer would be. There are things to consider, like, okay, data access, as you mentioned, but shadow AI is a key one. So are you deploying AI fast enough in your company to prevent your employees to use non-authorized tools which threaten your data, your assets, your brand. And I'm seeing a lot of it, and not a lot of people being accountable for screening and controlling shadow AI. So that would be the second one. Cybersecurity, top of mind risk, far ahead from any other risk. So innovation, taking risks, training, learning at the exco level, understanding, framing the right strategy to be a frontier firm, to win on your market, ensuring that you deploy and develop AI, because it's both a top-bottom strategy to be executed, but it's also a bottom-up one.
Absolutely.
Because people who know about the pains to solve are the people who are working on those assets.
But it's so important. This is such an important point at the moment, because most organizations have not achieved their digital transformation. They have been hit by the generative AI tsunami, and now there is the agentic AI revolution. No one is ready. There is no curriculum at the moment, except maybe at the Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence in Abu Dhabi, that is preparing authorities and stakeholders to work with agent. However, one thing that people need to realize is that agentic AI will help achieve the digital transition, will help achieve the generative AI adoption. So the tools are actually not contributing to more complexity, but could help solve. And this, as we enter the last part of our conversation, gentlemen, short answers from all of you. Nate, speed, infrastructure, etc. Philippe really accurately mentioned cybersecurity, which is a top priority at the moment. Especially with everything we heard about Anthropic and Mythos. What are the lessons that you've learned that you would put on top of the agenda? Philippe shared his. Would love to hear yours when you're advising organization, public and private.
So obviously, when we talk about especially agentic AI that's touching tools and systems inside an enterprise, inside a government, etc., this becomes a very complex IT problem. Security, data, access to systems or blocking access to systems becomes very important. It's complex, but actually it's solvable. IT teams and all the partners involved can work on these problems and solve them. So it's a constraint. It takes time, it takes money, it's complex, but it's definitely addressable, and successful projects are addressing that. But I think actually the other side of the coin, which is more the cultural and leadership challenge around adopting AI into business, into government, is the piece that's actually constraining companies and governments right now. Having the curiosity to play with AI, to understand the possibilities and to imagine new possibilities also takes time. So leaders need to find that time. They're very busy people, but also they need to create the time for their people to play and explore the new capabilities of AI. It's moving so fast. It actually sort of doesn't matter if you haven't started, because if you start today, you're learning stuff that's only a month or two old anyway, so you're not behind. But the quicker you start to play with the technology and understand the possibilities, the quicker you can imagine how you can use it to power new revenues, make access to public services more efficient, and progress.
Talal, one thing that G42 has introduced is digital embassies and Green Shield. We have little time, but can you just summarize what these initiatives are about?
I think it's a central piece to the topic of this panel. When you think of sovereignty in today's world as interconnected countries and companies and the collaborative nature that things have to happen in, rather than striving for technology independence, you need to look at strategic interdependence. And a digital embassy is a product of that. The conceptual understanding that I try to convey is that sovereignty isn't predicated on only having data residency anymore. In today's world, you have to be able to find like-minded partners in terms of companies and countries where you could then create digital resilience in a form that is hard to engineer and architect into a traditional cloud infrastructure if you're only looking at data residency as the biggest imperative. So when we came up with the concept of digital embassies, there is a G2G element in it that gives you the policy and legal air cover that's required to prevent something like a Cloud Act from getting in the way and allow a country to host its data in another country under its own data imperatives and security laws. And vice versa, this could be a reciprocal ordeal. So we're very happy that both France, India, and a couple of other countries that we have G2G agreements with are signed up to explore this further and begin to implement some of those solutions strategically.
So we learned today that, and we were reminding the importance of sovereignty, but sovereignty as a multi-layer, multi-stakeholder system that can be informed that what happened with legacy industries, the fact that it's all about partnerships, having the different stakeholders complement each other and working hand in hand. Please join me in thanking Talal Al-Kaissi from Core 42 and G42.
Thank you.
Philippe Limantour from Microsoft.
Thank you.
And Nat Ives from NVIDIA. I'm Olivier Oullier. Thank you very much for your attention. And thank you, Biotech, for this opportunity. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier, for that well-directed moderation.